Good to go. You're good to start, guys.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time zone you're joining from again. We appreciate you joining us on a Friday afternoon, the last session of the day. This is G3, and we are going to be presenting that final circle today around systems of support for classroom practices at that state, district, and school level. So my name is Kimberly Yannick, and I'm with the Center for Social Behavioral Supports at Old Dominion University near in Norfolk, and I live in Virginia Beach. And my colleagues, Regina Pierce, Christine Tapia, and Nicole Gonzalez will be introducing themselves in a bit, but they are here to graciously share their expertise and time with us today around this topic. So we have organized this session to just kind of be coffee and conversation. So if you can get yourself a cup of coffee or tea, a beverage of choice, we encourage you to relax and listen to learn and just enjoy, and offer other considerations in the chat box. We have lots of people in this session, and we all appreciate the collective learning that comes out of these times together. So we want to start with our learning intentions and just describe how we landed on these. So the first one's around strategies for designing systems of support for the implementation of classroom practices. And what I think probably all of you know is that systems are challenging. This is probably the hardest part of the work we do, because as humans, we get comfortable in what's familiar, and scary change, which is often a lot of the work we do, can be a little scary. And so when I think about today and you're listening to the panel discuss systems, and you're thinking about how you might take some of those experiences to enhance your systems, what I want you to invite you to think about is how you prioritize equal time, not just for those kind of concrete practices, but also allow time for what some people might call the soft skills, where we're looking at acknowledging the fear and the feelings that come with change, and spending time up front, allowing space for that. It's challenging, especially when we're going through change in the middle of a pandemic or things are turned upside down. And so we really want you to think about, how do you build a system of support that not only considers building fluency with classroom practices, but also, again, some people call them soft skills like empathy. Think of perspective taking, staying out of judgment, noticing and communicating emotions. So I often call those the hard skills, and I think Brene Brown, I took that from her, or the heart work that has to come with this. So the second learning intention is looking at the approaches that the panelists have used to align classroom practices as part of this comprehensive professional learning system. And if you were able to join us in the last session or any of the other sessions, quite frankly, during the forum, I don't know about you, but I heard collectively from so many that there is so much we are asking teachers to do, especially now when we've asked them to pivot to different teaching and learning contexts on a dime, and most of the time without a whole lot of preparation or support. And so we want you to think about, how can you start to align the work that we do so that it becomes easier for a classroom teacher to implement all of the things they're asking of them. And our panelists have done an exceptional job of thinking about those tasks, those demands, and at the state, district, and school level, how have they been intentional about aligning that work? Alignment should happen above the level of implementation. It shouldn't be up to the teacher to do explore how to and understand how to align practices, whether it's SEL, behavior, restorative practices, etc. And the final learning intention is around approaches to building coaching capacity at the district and state and school levels. And we all know that coaching is a critical part of our work. So what we're going to hear about is, how do we think about moving from that coaching as a noun to coaching as a verb, and being very intentional about building a culture of coaching. So those are the learning intentions that we're going to explore together today. You've all seen the expectations and many of these upfront slides. I would just say take a movement break. It's the end of the day. Stand up, stretch, enjoy your beverage, your coffees. I'm going to skip over this. We will be using the polls feature today, and we'll use that in a few moments. And then we'll also use it at the end of our session where you can post Q&A questions. We also encourage you to use the chat to post questions as they go. If you're like me and you don't write it down, as soon as you think about it, you forget it. So please, we invite you to use the chat poll to record those questions. And again, if you get lost, there is a help desk who we want to send a big fruit basket to, we were commenting on, because they've been so extraordinarily helpful with all the tech issues for today. So many of you are here maybe with your team or as part of a team, and we want you to think about, okay, how does this relate to my practice, and what will I take back to my team? How does what we're going to hear from the panelists compare to our priorities? How could this work in our district? We're a large district or we're a small district. How do we, stop doing to make room for this work? George always tells us, before you start doing something new, stop doing two, or something to that effect. And I really invite you to think about that. Stop doing the stuff that, we don't maybe have any evidence to suggest it impacts anything, and think about how we align. There is a note taker with questions, guiding questions for you that's in the pod file. So if you want to take a moment and download that for yourself or print it out so that you can use it, we'll ask you to do that. And so I want to set us up for this time together. And I like to think about the work that, there's a whole book now, I guess, on upstream solutions. But thinking about the ways in which we traditionally, work. Traditionally, we do a lot of work where we allocate a disproportionate amount of our resources to those downstream solutions. We spend a lot of time rescuing, responding, reacting, both to student needs and staff needs. And that's a necessary part of our work. And what we want you to think about today is how can we think about reallocating, repurposing our resources to move upstream a bit so that we can get in front of things. We can think about prevention first. And I think the extraordinary thing about the stories that you're going to hear from our panelists is, just like George said, they think in triangles. It's always like, okay, what are we going to do for all, some, and a few? And how do we take that thinking, as George said, to think and behave and reorganize our resources to be more efficient? How do we apply that to systems of support for the adults, right? So what I love about their stories is you're going to find a huge focus on tier one. They didn't make assumptions about what anyone knew. They acknowledged and realized that we all come to the table with different lived experiences, different training, if you will. So we're going to do for all so we can ensure, consistency in language and practices, and do that as a tier one support for all staff. And so I want to invite you to think about, are there any areas when they talk today that perhaps you're using more resources in the downstream solutions that could be repurposed to upstream, really getting in front of the problem, right? And so you've seen the circles, and this is the last of the circles for this strand today. We've talked about how we work to align these things. So what are the outcomes we're trying to get to, and how do we align data and practices and now systems with the work that we're doing? And Amy spoke to, staff wellness in that first session with she and Terry. And if you haven't listened to it yet, get your popcorn and have a date with that recording this weekend to catch up on that one. But I thought it was interesting how she talked about it's a systems issue. And I was listening to a new podcast from Brene Brown, this morning, yesterday. And she gave this definition of a leader. And I thought this really resonates with the work we're going to do in this session today. And what she said was, a leader is anyone who takes responsibility for finding the potential in people and processes and who has the courage to develop that potential. And I just thought that was brilliant because what I heard from the stories of the panelists are, this is not a deficit approach. This is not a deficit-based approach. Each one of them talked to a strength-based approach and how we move from that culture of a coach as a noun to a verb is really that mindfulness and intentionality around uncovering that potential, those bright spots, and growing that. And that is what each of them has done, I think, just exceptionally well. I suppose I should tell you what that was. So there's a resource there that you can go and get. And we talked about this in the last session also, that talks about the systems of support that put it at your bedside and leave it there so you can continue to read and learn. So I'm going to ask the panelists. I'll start with Regina to just introduce yourselves because I know I can't do it justice.
Thank you, Kim. So hello and welcome. I'm Regina Pierce with our Virginia Tiered Systems of Supports under the Department of Education. And very briefly, my job is just to advise and implement on all things tiered systems across our three-legged stool of academics, behavior, and social emotional wellness.
Hi, I'm Christy Tapia from Santa Clara Unified. We were just with you for the previous session. I'm a district coach and I've been coaching for 6 years, and we focus on implementation of tier 1 and tier 2 more specifically, but we do coach the whole system, and we have an emphasis on the tier 1 classroom practices system.
Hi, my name is Nicole Gonzalez. I'm also from Santa Clara Unified. I'm a special education teacher and also a tier 1 PBIS internal coach at our school. I've done that for 3 years. My background in all of this is that I've been a special education teacher for 18 years, and I've also been an administrator in the past for 4 years.
So you can see we've got the cascade of implementation represented here today, and I hope you're as excited as I am to hear from them. And now we want to check in with you and see who all is joining us today. So does Nicole, you did such a great job. Do you have that up by chance? You're faster than the rest of us at getting to the polls. If not, we have plenty of people online. But we do want you to bring up the poll and answer that first question for us. I'm going to do the same thing just because I put Nicole on the spot.
I'm actually pulling it up right now.
You're just masterful at navigating all of this. And the polls isn't showing up for me. So by default, someone else will have to help me with that one.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so it looks like we have 12% is from the state level, 31% from the district level, 52% from the school level, 1% community agency, and 6% as other. And right now, no family members.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome again. And now we want to take a moment to just check in with you and see how you're feeling and just take a breather before we launch into our conversation with one another. And so we're curious to know how you're feeling, and we're just going to have fun for a minute. We hope that's okay with you. We're using a little bit of a play on words with music, and we're going to play a few songs for you. And we're not going to tell you who it is or what the song is, because if any of you are like me and you really geek out on Name That Tune, this is your moment. So we're going to play 5 songs, and then we're going to ask you to pivot to the poll to choose a song that best describes how you've been feeling this week, or even since the beginning of the school year. So here we go.
Because I'm happy, clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy, clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy, clap along if you know what happiness is to you.
this last one, this may age a few of us.
Take another look and tell me that silver woman, who's your man? Fish don't know could be my babe. Yeah. Who's your man? Take another look and tell me, babe. Who's your man? Who's your man?
All right. So that is the great Aretha Franklin, from those of us who are children of the 80s. No Bob Marley. You know, David, I had some requests, but some of them were shot down. I'm just going to say in my defense. So we're going to invite you to go to the polls, please, because just for fun, which one of these might you land on today? And Nicole, do you have it up by chance? Just because I don't
I
have any polls.
do. No, I do. So we have 4% happy, 4% help, 35% don't stop believing, 37% under pressure, and 20% who's zooming who. So totally get why people are feeling that way.
Yeah, many of us are hopeful, don't stop believing. We feel a lot of pressure, and maybe we're over Zoomed right now with Zoom meetings. So thank you for indulging us in that. Just a moment to take a nice little mind break and check in with you. So the rest of our time is organized really around the conversation, and there are 5 questions, and I'm going to be, I don't want to say moderator, I'm going to be the person asking the questions, and then I'm going to invite Regina to share state level perspectives, and Christy and Nicole, they kind of go back and forth as a lovely team, as you saw in the last session, to talk to the district and the school level. So their talking points are on the slides, and we decided we would leave those up, but I really want you to listen and remember to be mindful of those things you're hearing around that system of support that both allows space for capacity building with the practices and allows space to work on those heart skills, if you will, keeping in mind that we're asking adults sometimes to change, and that can be very challenging. So first question, are we ready? So can you describe really what prompted you to shift from what we might think of as a more traditional approach to professional learning, coaching support, where we train and hope, spray and pray, one-stop shop, those kind of deals, to move to this more systemic support, building systems of support? Simon Sadek, right, Regina? What is your why? What was your why at the state level for shifting your approach?
All right, so we always start with why. And so why the why of the classroom systems? And if you'll go ahead and move to the next one, Kim, and they can see the talking points. There we go, thank you. So there's no disputing the value of the impact of that teacher who got me, that teacher who supported me, that teacher who challenged me. And if we think about equity, every student should have that teacher every year. And so how do we make that happen? And what we think about is really we have to support teachers around their own collective efficacy. And all through that whole cascading model of supports, we have to think about the relationships, everything from the national level to then our classrooms, our communities, our families, our students, and how we build those relationships, especially now in 2020.
So I'm going to actually take a little personal approach to this question because it has really been a lifelong practice and belief system that has been instilled in me. I'm from a long line of educators, and when I was 6, I had 10 twin cousins, or I have twin cousins that were born with severe cognitive disabilities, and they are very aggressive. And then my mom became a special education director. So at 12, I was helping an extended day summer school, and just kind of continues on. I worked in group homes and did that work, and have always done direct service work with structure, predictability, the 5-to-1 ratio, and even writing behavior plans at a really young age. And so I went into teaching naturally, into special ed, and I started at a non-public school for kids who had been kicked out of county. And actually, I need to back up and say I'm from Iowa originally, And I moved to California, and my first experience in California was in a non-public school where kids had been kicked out of county and public schools because of their problem behavior. And I was a little shocked at the system because I'd never seen anything like that. And I have always believed deeply in kids, and always believed that our system was broken and that the kids were the miracles and the adults were the problem. Sorry. Um, and so I've always had this lens that we really need to do the work. And I knew how powerful the work was because throughout my experience, I've worked with incredible educators, incredible care providers, and then I'm not too shabby myself in this area when it comes. And so I know that power. And so when I went to the public schools, it was in the recession when kiddos were coming back in because zero tolerance was not something that was really happening anymore. And so I was designing systems as a teacher to support kids in public school and keep them in, and training. And I would train my staff because I had a comprehensive classroom system that were based in these classroom practices. And then just went through a couple districts working with kids with emotional and behavioral disabilities. So when this job came up, this MTSSB coach, and I knew that I would be able to work in a systematic level to influence teachers and just whole entire systems to shift, to work with kids in meaningful and impactful ways. It was like a dream come true because I'm cheesy and I believe this is world-changing work. And I also now have 2 children, and next year my daughter will be in kinder. And so I can think of no other important work, and my why continues to grow as I have different experiences in my life.
Yeah, for myself, I feel like most of the time, as I've evolved as an educator, the question I always go back to is what is best for the student? And I try to really use that lens when I'm making decisions of what's either happening in my classroom or as we're working as a staff for the school, and even as my work at a district level. And I just believe that systems and evidence-based practices lend to doing what's best for students. One of my favorite sayings from my current principal is clarity precedes competency. And what that means is that when teachers have a clear vision of what our plan and actions need to be to implement effectively, and when they have that, I feel like systems support that work. When systems give clarity to teachers to be able to move forward in supporting our students. And my biggest piece to systems is that when we work collaboratively as a school site and as peers in implementing these systems and evidence-based practices, in the end, we're helping all the students in our school instead of just our little world of our classroom. We're able to touch everybody.
Hearing a lot of already, it sounds like from the beginning, you all held a vision with your colleagues and you were very intentional about planning for capacity building, scaling up of these systems, if you will. Okay, moving on to question 2. So, many of us, we're aware that that one and done training approach to, that we do, sometimes we have little check off lists that just, is driven by the demands that are put on all of us as educators. And many of us would like to start that shift to this systems approach. How do we build comprehensive systems of support aligned as well for implementing these evidence-based practices that you referenced, Nicole? Just briefly, could you describe a sentence or two that on how you have supported that shift, or how your team, the leadership team you work with, has supported that shift? And Regina, would you mind? Look at there, I remembered.
So Kim, you knew I was going to need 2 bullets, so thank you.
Okay.
You know me. So the first thing that I would say is that we worked really hard to align and integrate with each district and school what it is that they already had. So how are you already defining quality instruction at Tier 1? And so you can take, any of those practices, but how does it fit into your overall big view of what does quality core instruction look like? So that's the first one. And then the second thing is we made a shift by not calling it classroom management anymore. So we wanted to reframe it into thinking about a positive environment where we set students up for success. And when we go back to what George Sugai said in the opening statement, I think really he says it all in the opening statement. But he was talking about the protective factors. So in our classrooms, we want to enact those protective factors, and that includes those academic competencies, that self-management, and so that it's all embedded into that Tier 1 approach.
Lovely. Christy?
So I really work from a relationship approach. So creating and sustaining relationships with others is very important in every level when doing this work. And then the other thing is what Kim, you were talking about in the beginning, is shifting the culture to a culture of coaching instead of the coach being, hey, there's that Coach Christy. No, we have a culture of coaching, and it's supportive and not evaluative, and we want people to feel comfortable with it.
For working at a school level, and it's a small school, right? We're a school of maybe 18 teachers. When we're looking at our systems, we really are trying to look at how can we work smarter and not harder, because you keep on adding these layers to teachers and they just start getting bogged down with all of these initiatives that they need to be putting in place. So for our school, we're really looking at, okay, we have multiple systems. How can we align them? How can we do it in a smart way so we're not adding more work? What can we replace versus just pile on? And what structures can we put in place for those systems that make us most effective with our time?
Thank you all. And Timothy posted in the chat, language can be such a driver of how we perceive our world. And I don't think any of us could agree with you more, Timothy. Language matters. And so to your point, Regina, I don't know if you want to offer anything else to that, but it sounds like you've made a shift to be mindful of the language because as Timothy brings to our attention, it does drive the way we perceive things.
Yes, language. I was going to say those exact same two words. Language matters. Absolutely, it does. And we actually changed this one set of professional learning. We just call it effective classroom systems. So we just want to be effective.
Yeah. The other thing I heard yesterday in the equity strand from Ruthie was that you start with where you are, start with what you have. And I think that just honors all the collective work that's come before. And so how do we start with what a state, a district, a school, a classroom has and shape those systems around that? I just think that that's so important. And the relationships, Christy, that we model through our coaching, through our training, as we all know, that's critical for, we've got to build trust with people in systems so that they feel safe to be afraid, to have courageous conversations, to be uncomfortable with change. So I really appreciate all that the three of you offered with that. All right, question 3. So you gave us a brief response, and now we're going to spend some time really getting to the juicy details of the work. Like, how did you do it? What does it look like and sound like for building that capacity within this, as you say, Regina, classroom practice systems, really neutral language so that you can do that alignment work right within this, and thinking about that as you look to support all teachers in the work that you're doing?
Well, so that's a longer answer, but I want to go back again to that recurring theme that you've been hearing all through the conference: build a system. So at the state level, what we did is we have been trying really hard to align all of our materials so that everything looks similar. So when we do our social emotional wellness trauma training, that aligns to the TFI. We're beta testing our academic TFI. We're trying to make everything look and sound like so that it seems connected and aligned, so that people aren't looking at things almost with new eyes every time they come in, just as Nicole and Christy were saying, wait, what's this now? And so when we train in classroom systems, just to be sure, we have this little trick. We embed the systems piece in the practices training, and we use an icon. We use the little gear icon to say, okay, now we're talking about the systems. And you don't leave that professional learning until you've actually started on a coaching plan. So we try to put all of that together. And then finally, again, just like Christy and Nicole were saying, we made sure that the data collection tool was for school-wide and that it was fairly simple. And so that for each practice, we could see how things were working school-wide, because really, if only a few teachers are doing it, then we really can't call it a system, can we? So if you'll, I'm going to give you an example of that on the next slide. So this is one of our division coaches from Frederick County, Virginia. And when you watch her, it's a 1-minute clip, but here's what I want you to think about. You know, I can't let you watch something without having you have a reflection thought. And so here's what I want you to think about. Again, back to the keynote. When George Sagai was talking about effective responses, he said, continuous coached professional development. Okay, continuous coach professional development. And so when you watch this, I want you to think about how they're using that as an effective response.
So our systems piece of implementation of effective classroom systems is to build that into our mentoring program. One of the things we wanted to do was to ensure that all teachers were using these systems, these practices in their classroom, and we didn't want it to be happenstance, that some people received the training and some people didn't. So our mentor program is a 3-year program. And so all of our teachers in year 1, so these are teachers with 0 years experience who come to the division, receive training in effective classroom systems. Each building in our division has at least one person, either the lead mentor or an instructional coach, who has also received the training, and they are in the building to provide support and feedback to new teachers as they learn these practices and systems and take them back to their classroom and apply what they have learned through their training.
All right. So again, I think she just said it best for all of us. So when we're training classroom systems and coaching, I just thought it'd be nice to give you one little example. So if you look at the bottom, we have it arranged in what we're calling the VTSS 10, because you know we do need an acronym because there aren't enough. So in those VTSS 10, we reframed a few things, we added a few things. And I gave you one example at the top, the scaffolding. And so what we think about is, again, first of all, take these 10 and embed them into your context, okay? However you want to call them or rename them or reorganize them, it has to fit your context. And so I've picked the one, scaffolding, and you can see on this slide, we talk about what the practice is and then also how it impacts students with trauma who might be impacted by trauma. And we adapted that from the Midwest PBIS just so that people could see those links. Again, so much of what we do in terms of high leverage practices for students with disabilities, English language learners, many of these practices are all inclusive, if you will. And so I've shown you scaffolding, but I just have to share that my absolute favorite one to teach is active supervision. And the reason I like that one so much is because people think of active supervision as just like managing your classroom. And we started off with a little cartoon, and the teacher has the blackboard up, and she installed rear view mirrors on the side of the blackboard. And so it was like her way of doing supervision. But the beautiful thing about active supervision, that's always the aha, it's one of our most effective ways to build relationships. When you do active supervision well, you are truly building relationships. And it's also one of the most perfect situations for you to provide feedback, both academically and behaviorally. So again, just trying to think about each practice and how we can expand on it and make it more effective so it's not just classroom behaviors.
And before I to pivot over to the next part of this, Regina, there's been questions about the academic TFI, and I was wondering if you might speak a little bit more to that.
Absolutely. We're beta testing that now. And again, as a tool, just so that all of our tools look the same, it aligns with the TFI. You know, it starts with 1.1, 1.2 in teaming. So, and not everything is a perfect match, but, you know, 1.8 is about classroom practices. And so we are beta testing that, and we're getting ready to share it, but we haven't quite gotten there. We've gotten the national feedback. We're doing the first run through with it, again, just so that all of our pieces fit together. So watch for our website. I can share that with you at the end. So not quite ready, but almost there. We're really excited about it.
Great. Thank you, Regina. I'll let you continue then.
And so finally, and this piece might be more for some of the folks in the audience who are setting things up at a district or a state level. One of the things that we want to think about where we intersect is more with a district, or in Virginia, we always do things a little differently. We call them divisions. So a district or a division, that's mostly where we're going to intersect. But then we will also move down in the cascade and also up. And what we want to make sure that we do is that there are folks at that district level, and Nicole and Christy said this in the last session, so that builds the capacity. We have this rule that when you go into a school, into the demonstration sites, you never go alone. You know, someone from the division always has to go with you, again, for that capacity building. We work a lot with leadership teams, and we've done a lot of training in coaching teams. So moving from just the shoulder to shoulder into team coaching. And then we also have a series at the state level, a systems coaching institute, where folks go. There's 3-day sessions and series to be better prepared to be a systems coach across the state and the district.
So a lot going on in Virginia. You've done alignment around the practices, and I think if I don't want to misspeak, but I seem to recall in your story when we were preparing for this, Regina, that when you start working with a district, you kind of take inventory, as you said, of what you have, including coaches. Who are the coaches already here? What are their roles and responsibilities? Is there a specific coaching approach that they use? And you do that level alignment and looking for ways to, so that if this group of coaches is working with classroom culture and this group is doing that, I thought I remembered you talking to intentionality around alignment of those efforts, their languages, their practices, approaches. Is that accurate?
That is one of our first activities. We do a division initiative map, and that's always an interesting activity, because then all of a sudden you realize, oh my goodness, there is quite a lot going on here. So again, going back to what you said earlier about what are the 2 things that you can take away. And then we take those initiatives and move them across all the systems pieces. So yes, we do start there. And then also, what are the assessments that we utilize? Because certainly that pendulum swings back and forth too, in terms of too few assessments and too many assessments, especially now in 2020.
Great, thank you for elaborating. Anything else before I ask Christy and Nicole to share their experiences at the district and school level? Okay, so Christy, Nicole.
So one thing that Nicole and I have continuously talked back and forth about is Regina and Kimberly collaborating with you and hearing what Virginia has in place is just so amazing. And we are hoping to follow in your footsteps as we build our system. And really, we are building our system from the middle, per se, because my co-coach Bess, which we've talked about in the last session, and I really do a lot of the planning around our systems and what that looks like in collaboration with our site leadership teams. And so building capacity has looked like the tier 1 and tier 2, 3 meetings, coaching that in an I do, we do, you do model based on roles and responsibilities. If a team member needs more support, there's an external coach there to help guide them through the process. And this system was in place more pre-pandemic, but we had quarterly internal external coach collaborations where we would dig deeper on the systems and the classroom practices, and we always highlighted a classroom practice and had one of the internal coaches share their strategies and how they're moving their school forward. And every year in May, we have a digging deeper day where schools, site leadership teams get together at the tier 1 and tier 2, 3 level, and they review their data, outline their scope and sequence for the next year, problem solve and collaborate with other teams, and then action plan for the upcoming year. Do you want to add anything at this point, Nicole? You think? Okay. And then monthly at a site level, at least monthly at a site level, I collaborate with my internal coaches, and we monitor the action plans and look at the scope and sequence, and we are always having our eye on the classroom practices and what's next in our system, our classroom practices system. And then the model for supporting teachers in the classroom differs school to school based on the capacity, the internal capacity they have. You heard Nicole last session talk about how she goes in and gives feedback. And so they have that built in at most sites. I'm doing that still if there's a request, and then coaching, I will still go in and coach upon request or if there's a need, and model the practices. And then, we did this process so differently than the ideal of exploring and then implementing. It was like, you guys are doing PBIS in 3 days. And so through this quick implementation, we've learned so much. And what we're really trying to do with the SEL exploration is link everything, take inventory of what we have so we can really expand our system, build more capacity, and then define tier 1 on a district level, and then start building our multi-tiered system of support or PBIS framework at a district level. Nicole.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the things that the district level, what Christy and Bess have had set up for those of us who are tier 1, tier 2 coaches has been really important, because we get to collaborate with others that are doing PBIS at a district level. And then when we look at implementation at our school site level, one of the things that was coming up at our site is committee fatigue. So we are a PLC school. We are also a PBIS school, and we're a small school. We're 18 teachers. I think I've mentioned this before. And so when you have these two pretty big committees constantly meeting, you have a good 8 people on each side. That's a lot of people either doing both committees, or you have a lot of people constantly having to do committees, and people are just getting burnt out. And so we needed to find a way to be able to do these two systems more effectively. And so one of the things we did is we joined both of those committees into one, and we made it a school site leadership team. And we intentionally made it small. So there was someone for representing a teacher representing K1, a teacher representing 2, 3, 4, 5, special education, and then the principal, our external coach, our wellness coordinator, which is for school site counseling and SEL, and then as well as a classified staff member. So we made it small, and then we really talked about, okay, how can we make these meetings effective so people aren't, so trying to cover 2 things at one time isn't taking forever. So some of the things that we talked about doing was, okay, the meeting's going to be 45 minutes twice a month. If we don't finish the agenda, we don't finish the agenda. It's a hard stop because everybody's time is precious. And with that, we really made our time in that meeting efficient, because we had a note taker, we had a facilitator, we had a timekeeper. And we really had norms set that we would say, okay, you're really going down a rabbit hole. Let's come back. And so with that, one meeting was designated PLC, one was designated as PBIS, and there was also a PBIS liaison. So if you did not have a tier 1 or tier 2 person sitting on there, they were working with us, so they knew what needed to be discussed or talked about. And so I think in the end, that just really helped us pull our systems together and be more efficient and effective, and started building people to have more capacity to participate in things and to really work on their practices instead of just spending so much time in committees.
I'm so glad you said that, Nicole. That was actually a thought I hadn't said. But when we start so much of our professional learning, or when we start working with districts, we spend that time up front on those teaming structures. What do our teams look like as a systems piece? And people initially are almost a little bored with it, almost like, okay, can we just get to the real heart of the issue? But if we start there in the right way, those teams are huge. And so you're exactly right. You have to get that pays dividends in the end. So thanks for bringing that up.
And I actually want to piggyback on that because we are collaborating more in our department now, which is student services. And we actually put out a survey on what the teaming structures look like out there, because we know as coaches that the majority of the schools have so many teams, and we have tried. And I mean, one of the goals and priorities for me this year is to convince people to align their teams. And so we are really trying to give a positive nudge to say, let's focus on teaming first, because that would be a great place.
Brilliant. I'm so glad that you all talked to the teaming. Michelle had asked a question in the last session about that as well. Like, how do we do that? And this is so critical to have teaming structure alignment at the building level, at the district level, at the state level. I know Virginia, it's an ongoing process, but you have leaned into inviting others out of silos to collaborate and to work around alignment. And I think that that is such a gift of a system to teachers who are, being asked to do things. I was wondering, Regina, you mentioned the systems coaching 101, 102, and someone had asked just for a little bit more on that. I'm wondering if you might just describe that scope and sequence, or some of the things you might work on in a systems coaching at the state level for your state coaches and district coaches.
Absolutely. And actually, anybody who wants to see that, we have a one-pager scope and sequence, if you will, a little bit about that. So our contact information is at the end. You can email it to me. You can email me. That is, and when you were talking earlier, Kim, about the soft skills. So systems coaching talks about really the way of work of a multi-tiered system, particularly the Virginia tiered systems. So it makes sure that everybody has the knowledge, skills, and abilities to coach the content, if you will. But it also leans into then, what are the soft skills? What are our soft skills for coaching teams? What are our soft skills for shoulder to shoulder coaching? Just generally speaking, what makes a good coach, and how to reflect on that.
Yeah, and it's so important, Regina, to have those skills and build capacity to have those skills as well.
Yes.
And I was wondering, Christy and Nicole, I was in the grant you're talking to, but I think it would be helpful for people to just quickly to highlight, some of the routines you built to build that system. Like all of the things you had here, you had 8 practices, you had 3 to 4 learning walks in the beginning. You looked at alignment, you used the CCU classroom checkup, which has routines built into it. I was just wondering if you might talk to how you started with those routines, what it took to get those in place. And I know you talked to fading some of those things out. Anything else to add to help us get a better feel for that?
We'll do the TFI, and we've inconsistently done the SAS, but plan on doing. And another thing we want to do more of is the climate and culture survey. But yeah, we just did the work. I think we just like jumped in and did the work, and then kept it going, and then had to when we scaled up, we scaled back on the classroom practices and used data to inform our decisions and how we're going to develop that. And I don't know, Kim, Nicole, do you have anything to add, or?
No, I think you're covering it good. I mean, I think at a school site level, it was just about really making sure everybody had a role, but wasn't the same people on the committee at all times. So like we even implemented where you only sat on school site leadership for 2 years, and we rotated people through. So for example, there's 4 of us for special education. So we're each kind of rotating through doing our 2 years. And so that way, again, it's not the same people sitting on, and you as a teacher maybe have capacity to, okay, I'm adding to this school site, and now I get a bit of a break from all that extra work.
Sorry, squirrely, but like we use Swiss data for behavior tracking tools and our Chico tracking. And so that's another data point that we're using as we're going along, and we've continuously used that. And we are now going to the electronic means of that.
Mhm.
And one of the things on Bracker has really built capacity because they do have time limits on their SLT, and that has been amazing because then there's a deeper understanding of the work. And even the first year, 3 years ago, when Nicole came on and they merged, there were no PBIS reps from the study. It was all, they were all new. And so I just want to, the work is doable and it can be understood and done quickly because Nicole took it, owned it, and the system was in place to help guide the work. And that's what really has kept it going and sustaining.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Christy. And that's what Nick and Nick Diggs, my colleague, and I talked about in the coaching session B3 is as you move through generations of, using these routines, using these structures help to sustain that consistency and build that capacity. And I'm hearing you reflect out that as well. So thank you for elaborating on that. So question 4, what have been facilitators and barriers to initial implementation and sustainability?
So facilitators, and again, I sound like a broken record. Let's just recap what you've been hearing all through these past 3 days. You've heard a lot about usable data systems, and those usable data systems, when we have learned and worked with divisions about how to build data systems that cover behavior, mental wellness data sets, academic data sets, and being very strategic about which data sets you look at across the division, that's been just a huge facilitator. You've heard throughout the 3 days about positive leadership. We're focusing a lot on teacher voice. We know from Hattie the high effect size of that collective teacher efficacy, so we focus on that, and those have been huge facilitators. And then for the barriers, I think, again, everyone's might be similar, but I'll share a really quick story with you. We have one of my colleagues, when we do the professional learning around classroom systems, does something at the very end called wow and how. So the wow was the aha. So this is something you may be able to take back with your learning. The wow is the aha. So what really wowed you during this session? And then the how are the questions that you have around how to implement. So just for, we have too many folks to put it in the chat box, but for 15 seconds, guess what the biggest how is across every training. I'm going to give you 5 more seconds. You can stop and jot if you like, but what's the biggest how? Well, you probably guessed it, and it is a clue on the slide, but buy-in. Every single time, multiple sticky notes were all about how do you get teacher buy-in. And so that's been one of the biggest barriers. And we've actually put into some of our professional learning sort of being preventive. What are ways that you can engage all teachers and get that buy-in? And then I think, it's just a really hard time. People are just really burned out. As Nick and Christy were saying earlier, there's a lot of siloed approaches, a lot of really good folks doing wonderful things, but we've got to figure out how to align that. And that can't happen at the school or teacher level. That has to happen at a district and state level.
Agree. Regina, did you want to speak to anything here before? Because all 3 of you had brilliant stories.
I think I've shared a lot. We were talking a lot about that collective teacher efficacy, and I'll let Nicole and Christy talk about their DBDM.
And I think what Nicole and Christy are about to share are really concrete things around facilitating buy-in as well. So
the database decision making, and we went into a lot of depth about it in our last session, is when internal site coaches are able to take the wheel and really lead the process and the practices system from their perspective and own it, it is transformative because they have the relationships and they are on the ground floor every day doing this work. And so it just has been such a powerful experience. Nicole, would you?
Absolutely. I mean, just having that ability to work with you and have that that coaching piece behind trying to have that teacher buy-in, as Regina had talked about, has been huge in moving our school forward. And those relationships that we've been building to have that culture of collaboration is pretty key in all that work that we're doing.
And the other thing that is listed on this bullet point is that doing those walkthroughs together as a team, internal and external coaches. So we're walking through and seeing the things and comparing what we see, and just using that data to give feedback is very powerful too.
And you also, Christy, if I'm remembering correctly, and Regina alluded to this earlier, that you always do that in pairs. Like, who's coming with me? Because I'm always thinking about how I build capacity. I think Regina said, when you work with a district, who in the district would be supporting this work, to sustain it? And come with us, come do this work with us. So, okay. And can I advance it, Christy, or are you?
I think that I kind of got a little bit confused in my mind what the question was for a second, but now I'm going back to it. And yes, go ahead and advance facilitators and barriers.
Yes.
And so one of the things I want to point out is the MTSSB study was such a facilitator for us, because I'm not sure where we'd be at with the work if we didn't have that like push in the right direction and that structure to build from. And some of the barriers are time, the lack of time. And then there also another barrier is just how we are as a collective, as a whole in the district, and the understandings of what we do, and trying to figure out how to get everyone on the same page. We are doing MTSS work. The schools that I support are like 6 to 10 years ahead of that work. So how do you then timeline, have a 3 to 5 year plan where we're really mapping that out? And I know that we're working towards that. We've had a huge turnover in administration, and I know that we're working on moving that forward. It's just a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different implementation phases to take into account. And one of the things I've actually been reading a lot about, like leadership and success lately, and one of the things that I've been thinking about, because a lot of the times I think of the disconnect between our work and like where the district is as far as their work, is that the creative vision, that we actually get more creative as there are more barriers. And so one of the things I've thought about a lot lately is that our classroom practice system is so deep, because throughout this work we've really had to try and influence people to want to make this change. I mean, because I remember a long time ago, or a few years ago, Kent put up this slide that said, like, we give the tools first, they implement the tools, and then they get the why, because they change based on the tool implementation. The why doesn't always come first. Sometimes it comes second, because you have to use the practice first and then believe in it. Well, because we've had to really influence to want to do the work. So we've had to just really bring the data to them differently and work from an internal perspective to get the majority of people to want to shift. I don't know if that makes sense, but we've had to be really creative, because there have been a lot of barriers to keeping it sustained.
But Christy, I think you nailed it. It's the data that drives all of that. I mean, when you have people engage with data, when Nicola, I just was so thrilled in the last session when you talked about, you created a platform for teachers to have voice and choice. It wasn't like you were doing with, not doing to. And I think that is a huge facilitator buy-in, that I have some voice and choice in the matter of all of these demands that are being asked of me. And I think, the research on stress in their workforce would say it's that combination of demands and the ability to have some voice and choice in navigating those that helps push that stress levels down. So I just think it's absolutely brilliant the way you've been so strategic about engaging the staff in the process. They're part of it, right?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think one of my facilitators to be able to do that work is really my principal. He believes in the teachers being a part of the process. He believes in teacher voice. He doesn't want to be just telling you what you have to do. He wants you to be able to come to it. So that's pretty big when you have the leader of your school saying, this is what I want. And so, you know, on our school site leadership team, we actually have decision rules. And so when we're discussing issues about the school, the first thing our leadership team says is this a principal decision or a leadership team decision? And so that's said from the outgo. So then when you're discussing the problem, you know, oh, okay, this is like, we need to represent our team, or we need to give input to the principal so he can help make that decision. And then when people disagree with those decisions, it's not that they can just go to the principal and talk about it and get it changed. You have to bring it to the school's leadership team and say, okay, well, I disagree with it because of this. Can you consider these things? And so that you don't have people going around and around. But the other piece to that is our principal's built in time for us to do all the work, right? It's not taking our time in the afternoons. I don't know how he does it, but he does a whole school assembly every Monday for the first 30 minutes of school, and teachers start 20 minutes before that. So teachers have PLC time to work together, and it's not an added meeting on top of anything. And we really have that time to start our week with all of us talking about it. And he's built in that time in our staff meetings for PBIS to be discussed. So the fact that he believes in this work and he's building in the time for us to do our work is pretty huge. I would say barriers is like Christy has talked about. We're starting kind of from the middle. This is not a district initiative that we're implementing. And so sometimes the district personnel don't even totally understand all the work that we're doing. So then we have to get them caught up on what we're doing. And sometimes that can be a little challenging because you feel like you're a siloed initiative when you wish we were all working on it together.
Nicole, I'm ready to, like, my day is done and it's Friday, so how convenient, because you know, that system, what I hear is your principal values it by creating a system that allows for the work to be done. And that honors people's time and their expertise. I just think that is brilliant. I got goosies, as J-Lo would say. So I am gonna move us to the last one, but I'm just on a cloud right now, Nicole. That was so exciting to hear. And I hope all leaders hear that if you value it, your system includes creating time and space for it to happen. So last question, and maybe we can just kind of do a quick little roundabout so we leave a little bit of time for Q&A. But, you know, I feel like in this pandemic we're in that it's been a bit of a test to our systems. Like, what has this revealed to us? And so I'm curious to know what you've discovered about your system in light of this current reality. And Regina, you have this beautiful balcony view across the state, but I'm just curious to know, you know, what have you uncovered?
You know, again, it's not going to be any surprise here. The places that had really good systems in place before the pandemic, it was a lot easier for them. And actually, I can make my response really quick. I was talking to one of the division coaches and she said, you know what? When people are really overwhelmed, you go back to doing what you knew how to do. So if you weren't really implementing with fidelity in terms of having a really, you know, lots of student engagement, things like that, if you weren't quite there with your implementation in your systems, then you reverted back. And she said, and that's when you see people just reverting back to lectures and worksheets and struggling through this time. But the people that had been implementing well, it was just more of a pivot or a tweak to think of different ways to engage. So I think that might be able to just sum it up that way.
Yeah, and that reinforces what Amy offered this morning about, and Christy said in the last, back to the basics, you know, don't abandon all the work you've done. Just how are you going to adjust to pivot to that different teaching and learning context? I love that. Christy and Nicole.
I think that one of the biggest things is it's really validated that the alignment of systems and initiatives it's so important. And then just that educators are outstanding champions, and they just have really shifted quickly and been able to make this work. And so I'm going to keep it short, but those are the two things I'm going to point out.
Yes, I mean, I think having our systems in place has really allowed us to be able to shift from your traditional PBIS to taking the system we have in place for PBIS to address the SEL, right? So, because really right now, if we're having any behaviors, it's because we're also going through trauma right now, and we need to address those the social emotional learnings. And so we've had that system, but it's also highlighted that because we don't have a system coming from the district down, that there's challenges you're creating in the midst of things. So,
Anything to add? Any points here that you all want to talk to more explicitly, Nicole and Christy?
I think because we were lucky to have the first session with everyone too, that a lot of this was addressed through the SEL exploration, that we're going to a district level, district wide approach with that. And we're trying to really get this to be something that is done across our unified district.
Thus illustrating the point, the importance of aligning our circles, right? They're so connected. You just can't tease them out. So I love that, Christy. That's a great way to think about that. Any other final thoughts before we move into a Q&A from our colleagues that are joining us? Okay. Oh, what did I miss something? Let me just make sure. Is there anything else? Oh, Swiss family conferences.
I did see that, Nicole. Remember we were, and I didn't know.
that's right.
You want to talk about that? I touched on it a little bit in the last session, but the BTT rollout.
Yeah, so with our BTT at our school, which is our behavior tracking tool for PBIS, is we adjusted it to have SEL pieces on it. So we could start tracking, okay, who's having maybe major issues with crying or having their camera off and communicating with the teacher. So we just know that maybe we need to get some interventions going for particular students, but we needed a way for the teachers to be able to communicate that in a very systematic way. And so we added that, and then we're rolling out the electronic version because obviously we're not all, for us, we are still distance learning. So we are all teaching from homes. And so how can we get that communicated to everybody? So that was a pretty big piece. And then our conferences, which happen with families at the end of September, were really focused not on the academic progress of students, but how are you doing in this pandemic? Like, how are you doing with distance learning? What does your family need? What does your child need? Because some students are really struggling, obviously, and we needed to make sure we were catching everyone.
And I think another thing too, on a scale of getting our wellness coordinators, we actually have the mental health providers that work within our district, and they sit on our teams, and they each elementary school has 2.5 days a week of a wellness coordinator. And so with the alignment on the behavior tracking tool or the referral, we wanted to really try and align how we are getting kids into like counseling services and other types of interventions so that we have that data to make decisions. And it's something we have really been working on for a long time, but a really good opportunity came out of when we were switching to that electronic BTT, and then knowing the power of Swiss or PBIS apps that you can personalize the resource or the referral.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Nicole.
There was just a question from somebody about the electronic behavior tracking tool. Do you just want to quickly explain Swiss, Christy?
Well, PBIS apps has a school-wide information system, and you can track your majors and minors, your problem behaviors, and so that's, and you can also track your check-in, check-out, and individual interventions, and it is PBIS apps.
Yeah, and Susan put a link to it. Yeah, Susan put that link, and there's paperless entry now. I think maybe that's what, like,
Yes.
teachers don't, they can just log in and do right
Yes.
there.
Yeah, we made every teacher got a login so that they can go in, and then we showed them how to do the paperless. And Christy worked on adding other categories to it so that it was SEL as well.
Sorry, I misunderstood the question. Yeah, and it's really easy in the user management. You just click on user workflow and it's really easy to activate for the school.
And I'm assuming you use the custom fields to set up the SCL or whatever you're doing with that. Is that right?
Exactly. Yep, exactly.
Someone was asking. Okay, great. I could just sit here and talk to you guys the rest of the day. Well, it's early for you. It's 5 o'clock somewhere here on the East Coast, though, almost. So I do want to look at some questions. I think there's probably some sitting in the chat box here, which there we go. Some, okay, quite a few it looks like. So while I'm pulling up questions, I'm also going to put this up here for you to look at for the evaluation. Okay, I'm just looking through the questions here. Okay. Kelly, and if you see anything that I haven't addressed, you've been so masterful at monitoring questions in chat, and Kat has as well. I think we might have gotten to all of the ongoing questions. Let me just make sure. Are there any other outstanding questions, team, that I'm missing as we scroll through chat and our internal chat?
I think Nicole and Regina have been masters of following along. I saw Nicole typing back. So Nicole, is there anything out there?
Don't think so.
I'm going to move Nicole to the East Coast to be a coach for me for a month or so. Get me fluent with all the stuff she does so quickly.
You know, when you've had to be a teacher distance learning since March, you learn all this tech stuff real fast.
Yeah, well, you've been a light in my tunnel this week, I have to say, Nicole, with your technology. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'll echo that.
Well, we really appreciate you joining us last session. Here are our emails. If you need anything, please reach out. Don't go digging for things. We are happy to share things with you. I did want to notice, Christy, the attribution. I didn't know if you wanted to talk to that. There was an attribution here where we got this beautiful slideshow from. I left it on there. So it's already done for us. So there's that. Lovely. All right. Well, we thank all of you, and we hope you find time this weekend to rest and restore. Get out there and create some opportunities to do that for yourself, and hope to talk to you and meet you in person maybe next year in Chicago. Bye, everyone. I want to stop sharing, but